Chapter 12 Making Bombs. One entire wall was draped off. On a wooden table were metal bowls like those I had seen being made in the factory. There were long metal tubes, wires, and other pieces as well, all organized neatly on that same table. Hadn't the woman told us that there was supposed to be no metal in the room? All of those pieces were made of metal. A wooden barrel rested on the floor beside the second table, its wooden cover stamped with the German word, gunpowder? A low shelf that was nearly the length of the room was positioned in the front of the curtained wall. Lined up neatly on its surface were bundles of what looked like a kind of metal straw. What were they making in this room? The second table held a weighing scale and an array of porcelain measuring spoons. A separate table was mounted with a mechanical device that looked like a smaller version of the automatic sledgehammer in the factory. A wide wooden rack that reached almost the height of the ceiling took up most of the wall beside the entrance. "In this room, you will be making bombs," said the supervisor. "The reason for no metal is because you could create a spark, and that could cause an explosion." Making bombs? I suddenly felt weak at the knees. I had been so afraid of Allied bombs hitting us, yet our fate here was even worse. They expected us to make bombs for the Nazis, our enemies. Here, I thought, I had been so smart, staying alive by pretending I was older and demonstrating my value in the hopes of getting a good job. Marika was the luckiest. At least she had died innocent. My eyes locked onto the metal components arranged on the table. They had looked so harmless in the factory down below. But now, as I looked at them, I could see how they all fitted together like the pattern pieces of a dress. The woman walked over to the table of metal parts and with both hands positioned one of the cylindrical pieces so it stood upright. "This is the body of the bomb." She turned it so we could see the hollow inside. "You will seal the bottom with this." She held up a different metal part. "Then fill the hollow part with cordite." She set the cylindrical piece back down on the table and walked over to the array of straw-like bundles. "You must be very careful when you insert this metal straw. It is an explosive." The woman's mouth formed the words, and I tried to pay attention to her demonstration, but I was so horrified that the room swirled. How could she ask us to do this? Didn't she know that we were all hoping and praying that the Allies would win? If Hitler won, even if we somehow managed to survive, we would be slaves for the rest of our lives. If the Allies conquered Hitler, then they could fight Stalin for us and we might live. How could they force us to make these weapons? I took gulping breaths to keep from fainting as she explained what we had to do. I looked over at Xenia. Her face was ashen. Natalia's eyes were wide and her jaw was slack. We were all thinking the same thing. "Each of you were chosen for your deft fingers," said the supervisor. "And in case you're thinking of sabotaging these bombs, don't bother. You're being watched." She walked over to the drape and pulled it open. A man in a white smock sat at a wooden table. He waved at her and looked back down at the papers he had been working on. Behind him was a giant wall clock, showing that it was 6:45 a.m. "That is thick laminated glass," she said, tapping the partition with her fingernails. "And the rest of the factory is separated from you by several rooms. If you have an explosion, the only people to die will be yourselves, and this is the only room that will be damaged." The woman stayed all morning, supervising us as we learned how to assemble the bombs. My job was to precisely measure out the exact amount of powdered explosive needed for the nose of each bomb. These bowl-like pieces of metal, too much could cause an immediate explosion, and too little would make the bomb unstable. Phoebe delicately inserted the long wire-like fuse, making sure that not a single grain of explosive came in contact with it. Xenia inserted the long straw-like cordette into the body of the bomb, and Katerina tightened all the components together with a special metal-free hand tool. It was a delicate procedure. There were bits of explosive dust in the air. One spark, and we would all be finished. The worst job fell to Mary. She was selected to operate the hammering machine. Unlike the automatic one we had seen in the factory, this machine had a hand lever. Once all of the components were assembled into a bomb, all of us would help her mount each one onto the front plate of her machine. These bombs weighed more than I did, and they came up to my chest. They were smooth and cold and hard to grip. It was terrifying for us to carry them. I would look into each of my friend's eyes and try not to breathe as we gingerly moved each bomb from the assembly table to Mary's machine. Once the bomb was in place, Mary would lower the hammer slowly, gently increasing the pressure until the various edges and ridges snapped into place. To keep the bomb cool, while she did this, the outside of it was washed with a milky substance that stayed liquid, even though it was colder than ice. Natalia's task was to keep that liquid flowing. It wasn't as precise a job as some of the others, but it was very uncomfortable, as she had to hold the icy container with her bare hands. We were indoors, yet her fingers looked frostbitten. The supervisor watched us like an eagle all morning, making sure that all of us could handle our jobs with accuracy and speed. When the clock in the room showed noon, she said, "Finish what you're doing, then follow me." She led us back out to the white room with the washing trough, and we removed our smocks. "You don't eat your meals with the other factory workers," she said as we followed her out the next door. "You will eat in this room at the table. But first you must wash off the explosive powder." For the second time that day, we scrubbed with the dreaded bleaching powder. As she was inspecting our hands, a man came in carrying 2 sloshing buckets, one large and one small. The woman left the room for her own lunch. We lined up, and he ladled us each a bowl of our usual turnip and water soup from the larger pail, then filled our drinking tins with something hot that he called coffee. When it was Natalia's turn, he served her from the smaller pail. I looked longingly at the potatoes floating in her Polish soup, but I tried to put it out of my mind. Letting her eat more in front of us was a torture for her as well. "Will you look at that?" said the man, tilting the larger bucket for us to see. "There's still more Russian soup left." My heart soared. "Sir," I said, "perhaps you could give us each a small bit more soup, and then you wouldn't have to have such a heavy load to carry back down to the canteen." "I could never do that," he said. "If I were caught giving extra food to an Austrian I would be punished." He picked up the pail and carried it over to our washing area. He poured that precious soup into the toilet and flushed. "There," he said. "Now I don't have to carry any of it back." I felt like pummeling him with my fist. How cruel could a person be to throw out food in front of starving people? And who would have known if he had given us the soup instead? We certainly would not have told anyone. I didn't want him to see how much his actions affected me, so I kept my face emotionless until he stepped out of the room. As soon as he was gone, I laid my head down on my arms and wept. The supervisor didn't come back in the afternoon, but the man behind the partition stood at the glass and watched our every movement, writing things down in a notebook from time to time. It scared me to think of how many bombs we were assembling. As each one was finished, we would stop what we were doing and carry it like a baby to the wooden rack by the door. By the end of the day, the rack was full. How many people would be killed because of our work? It made me shudder to think of it. The man behind the glass met us in the outer room when the whistle blew, to watch us wash away any stray flecks of gunpowder. I was thankful, and also a bit surprised to see that Bibi's wedding ring was where she had left it, and so was my crucifix. We were subdued on the train ride back to the work camp. I could hear the incessant whiz-boom of the American bombs, and the sound was so close to us that the rail car shook. Who made the bombs in Britain and America? Surely they had no slaves. One good thing about making bombs is that we 6 were able to wash in an uncrowded bathroom before getting on the train. That meant that we didn't have to wait in line to use the wash house at the camp. When I got off the train, Julie was there, an anxious look in her eyes. She fell in step beside me and walked me back to Barrack 7. I didn't have to be a mind reader to realize that she had something to tell me. Julie followed me in and sat beside me on my bunk. She had never done that before. I could see in her eyes taking in the room with curiosity. "This is just like my own barrack," she said. Then her eyes locked out on mine. "What job do they have you doing?" "Making bombs." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Where is that?" "In the same complex as that bombed metalworks factory. Our room is in a separate area." "Oh, Lita, how awful. It's my punishment for being good with my hands." Julie looked at her lap. Tears splattered down her cheeks. "It could be worse," I said. "It's not that," said Julie, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. "It's Luca," she sobbed. "He's gone." Was that what my dream had meant? This I could not take. Anything but Luca dying. I took her by the shoulders, but I saw him with my own eyes yesterday. He was healthy. She looked at me then, her eyes shining with tears. "You don't understand," she said. "He didn't die. He has somehow disappeared." "Escaped." Julie nodded. "The medical staff is in a frenzy. They've marked him as dead to save face, but I know he didn't die." I didn't want to ask her exactly how she knew that, and it didn't really matter. He had escaped. My heart soared. The fact of his escape was the best news I had heard in a long time. "Do you think he will make it?" I asked. "Hard to say. A farmer might take him in." I wrapped my arms around Julie and hugged her tight. "Thank you, Julie. You have given me hope." Xenia, Natalia, and Katerina came into the barracks while Julie was there. When I told them the good news, Xenia said, "I wonder if we could escape." "And go where?" said Julie. None of us had an answer. After Julie left, we were all wrapped in our own thoughts. How long could I bear to make bombs? The idea that escape might be possible gave me something positive to think about.